Why you wouldn't survive. 24 hours in the Middle Ages. I'll explain it to you now. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel if you are new and leave a like on the video. Now let's start. Do you think your life is difficult? You wouldn't last a single day in the medieval times. Modern conveniences have made us weak, and what people in the Middle Ages faced on a daily basis would shock you. Let's talk about medieval food, stuff that would have you running back to the 21st century faster than you can say McDonald's. For starters, forget everything you've seen in movies about huge feasts with huge turkey legs. For ordinary people, meals were bland, boring, and often dangerous. Most people ate a diet as exciting as watching paint dry. The farmers lived mostly on something called cottage cheese, basically a watery, sad soup made from whatever vegetables they could grow, cooked in the same pot for days. It was the medieval version of Mom's mystery stew, except instead of hiding vegetables, it hid bugs and dirt. Bread was the staple food for almost everyone, but it wasn't soft and sliced like the bread we enjoy today. Medieval bread was dense, dark, and often full of unwanted stuff. Flour was ground between two stones, which caused stone fragments to end up in the dough. People back then had stronger teeth not because of genetics, but because they were constantly chewing dough that contained stones. Here's a disturbing fact. Much of the bread contained ergot, a fungus that grows in rye. Ergot poisoning could cause hallucinations, burning, and sometimes death. Some historians believe this type of poisoning contributed to the hysteria of the witch hunts. Why entire villages would start hallucinating at once. Imagine thinking your neighbor is a witch, when in reality your baker just needed to clean his equipment better. Meat was a luxury. When they did get it, it was often nearly rotten because there was no refrigeration. To mask the taste of rotting meat, they used a lot of spices if they could afford it. Otherwise, they held their noses and hoped for the best. The 5-second rule in the Middle Ages was more of a 5-day rule. And the worst part? You couldn't even wash down that horrible food with water, because drinking the water made you sick. Most water sources were contaminated with human waste and other filth. Instead, everyone, even children, drank beer or ale. It wasn't the strong beer of today, but a milder, safer version of water because the fermentation killed germs. One study found that the average medieval peasant consumed about 8 pints of beer a day. Children as young as 5 regularly drank beer with every meal. Medieval children did not need false documents to drink alcohol, but to obtain clean water. Fish was common, but often preserved, dried, or salted, as fresh fish spoiled quickly. Those who lived near the coast could have fresh fish, but for those inland, fish would take days or weeks to arrive. The smell alone would make you faint. By now, your stomach is probably already in knots, which brings us perfectly to the next medieval horror, the bathroom. For the average person, going to the bathroom meant using a chamber pot, basically a bowl or bucket under the bed. Once it was full, you either emptied it yourself or waited for someone to pick it up. And where was it emptied? Usually out the window right into the street. The medieval version of "watch out below" was not for falling objects but for flying excrement. It was common to shout "Gardez-le" before throwing garbage. This warning came from the French "Gardez l'eau," beware of the water, although it was much less pleasant. This practice was so common that in some cities there were rules. You could only throw garbage after 10 o'clock at night. If you were lucky enough to visit a castle, you might find something called a garderobe, essentially a hole in a stone slab that allowed waste to fall down the wall. At Dover Castle, archaeologists found a garderobe that discharged excrement from a height of almost 70 feet. Kings and queens had thrones, but their bathrooms were just holes with drafts. For those who couldn't wait to get home to their own bowl, the options were grim. Public areas often had designated places to release, creating what today we would call open sewers. In London, there were communal latrines built on rivers, but they were few. The work of collecting and disposing of human waste fell to the gong farmers, the excrement farmers. These brave workers cleaned the septic tanks and transported the waste outside the city walls. They could only work at night, and the smell was so bad that they were not allowed in public places. Despite the horrendous conditions, they were well paid, earning about 4 times the wages of a common laborer. The smell of medieval cities was legendary. The River Thames in London was so polluted it was described as a stinking monster. Toilet paper? Forget it. People used what they had: leaves, moss, their left hand, or if they were rich, pieces of wool or hemp. The Romans used sponges on sticks dipped in vinegar or salt water, but that knowledge was lost. After a day of drinking beer to avoid illness and looking for a decent place to relieve yourself, you'd be more than ready to head back to the 21st century. But bathing was only one of the many horrors of medieval life. A typical farmer plowed his fields with wooden tools pulled by oxen, planted seeds by hand, and harvested with rudimentary tools. During the harvest, they worked 16 hours a day under the sun. Records from medieval England show that a peasant burned over 4,000 calories a day through physical labor alone. Medieval peasants didn't need gym memberships just to survive until Tuesday. Did you want to become a skilled craftsman? You had to start as a child. Apprenticeships began at age 7, when children were sent to live with a master craftsman. They worked 6 or 7 days a week for up to 14 years before becoming officers. Medieval counselors had a very simple diagram. Can you lift heavy things? Yes. Peasant. No. Early death. Some jobs were reserved for the desperate. Link boys were children who carried torches to light the way for the rich at night. Pure finders collected dog poop to sell to tanners. The wages for most jobs barely covered survival. A laborer in England might earn a penny or 2 a day, barely enough to buy 2 loaves of bread. There was no minimum wage, just enough to keep from dying before finishing the shift. With such hard work and poor nutrition, the body quickly gave out. Disease was everywhere. Medicine was almost non-existent, and what was called cure would be considered torture today. Medieval WebMD had only one diagnosis: you will probably die. A simple cold could be a death sentence. Without understanding germs or infections, illnesses were thought to come from bad air or an imbalance of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Fever? Time for bloodletting. A vein was cut, and the blood was allowed to drip into a bowl. Another common treatment was leeches. They were applied to the skin to extract bad blood. One medical text recommended up to 70 leeches at a time for certain conditions. Mortality was frightening. About 30% of children died before age 5. Life expectancy was between 30 and 40 years. Bubonic plague killed approximately 50% of Europe's population in the 14th century. The dental problems were horrible. Without toothbrushes or oral hygiene, cavities were everywhere. The dentists didn't make appointments. They waited for someone to scream loud enough for the whole village to hear. That's all for today. And would you survive 24 hours in the Middle Ages? Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. See you next time. Bye.